I do are the two most famous last words, the beginning of the end. But to lose your life for another, I've heard, is a good place to begin.
Well, good morning and welcome to the sermon follow-up video as we continue with the series Biblical Family. Last week's sermon was on the chosen bride and focused on Ephesians chapter 5. So we're just going to cover a couple questions, some things that you can review at home for deeper study. So first of all, I want to ask Pastor Kyle, what would be a substitute word for submission, as you know, this is really based on verse 22, wives, submit to your own husbands, for the husband is the head. So if you could just kind of give me another word for submission that might make it more palatable
I knew you were going to say that.
in our culture today.
It's less, no, I don't want to do that. A good substitute word for that could simply be yield. And
Okay.
It's not, I think, a lot of times in marriage, especially when we look at this passage, where it says, wives, submit to your husbands, but then it also says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loves the church. We think of it as a power struggle, or there's this power struggle comes in where wives often feel like they don't have any power because, I have to submit or I have to yield. I think yield gives a little better picture of that maybe in our context with our culture and language, in that it shouldn't be a power struggle between husband and wife, because neither one of us holds any of the power. It's not I have authority and you don't have authority. Neither one of us has any authority. All the authority and all the power is God's. And it rests with him, and he's the one that divvies it out accordingly to his purposes and calls both to yield and submit to him in that process. So yield is a good word for it. Not that submit is the wrong word, of course, but yield is maybe a better, I don't know if we want to just make it more palatable, but we do want it to be understood, right? We want it to be clear, and so I think yield it's a good substitute word.
Okay, so is it just as simple as the man's the head of the household and the woman's yields? Is it just basically that, or is this passage, does this present more than just what we can skim off the top?
Much more. Yeah. It's obviously more. It's not simply women do whatever your husband says to do, which we talked a little bit on Sunday. That's what we hear when we read this. That passage or that verse, wives submit to your husbands, gets all the press because we hear it in that. But it's really, we talked about how it becomes this cycle as the husband does what he's supposed to do, which is, which we'll get to. I think he's called to submit his will to the Father for the good of the bride, and when he does that and he does it effectively and he does that, obviously that takes time. It's a humbling thing. It's something that's done through prayer and through really wrestling and submitting our own will to him for the good of our bride and our wife. And as we do that, it awakens something in our wives that they see that we are submitting to the Lord for her good, and that drives her to have a stronger desire to yield, which gives the husband a stronger desire to yield to the Lord, which gives her a stronger desire, and it goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. And it's really instructions on a relationship that is unlike any other relationship we have on earth, right? We have relationships with our friends and our family and our children. None of them are the same as our relationship with our spouse. And we talked about this week how marriage in and of itself is an analogy to our relationship with Christ and to the church, the bride of Christ, that relationship with Christ. And so these are really instructions in how that relationship is supposed to work to give us a better picture of how the relationship that we have with God is supposed to work. Okay,
so if marriage is to be a picture of our union with Christ, so to speak, we also went to verse 31. It says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Can we relate that to the same relationship between us and our Father, or is that just simply marital Carol.
Right. No, it absolutely relates. It absolutely fits into that parallel. I've always wondered why it says the husband will leave his mother and father and cling to his bride, and the two will become one. Why doesn't it say the wife will leave her father and mother? And not that it matters, but I was curious. I was curious as to why that is. If this verse parallels and works in that analogy, which it clearly does, the whole thing is part of that analogy. It makes perfect sense because in our relationship with Christ, it is Him that left His Father. It is Him that came to us, I guess is the big picture there.
Yeah.
He came and pursued us. He came and chased us. He came and redeemed us. We didn't do those things to Him, right? And He came and He won us over and bought us back. And then it says that the two will become one flesh. And we as Christians become the body of Christ. And the bride of Christ. Both of those terms are used, and they're very powerful images. We are unified with Him and certainly become one in that sense. Which is why if you place your faith in Christ, if you make that commitment, if you give your life to Him, His righteousness is attributed to us,
Right.
and we become part of God's family because we're adopted into it and we're married into it. And so it's complete. So when God looks upon us, He sees Christ's righteousness because we are unified. And
Awesome.
it's a pretty cool picture.
Yeah, beautiful. The section there in chapter 5 starts off with saying, "Be imitators of God as beloved children." That's a pretty heavy request right there. Is that does that relate to this whole thing, or is that kind of separate and off to the side?
Yeah, so that part in chapter 5 says, "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us." It's kind of a bridge between chapter 4 and the bulk of chapter 5. But the instruction that we're given in the later parts of chapter 5, husbands and wives submit, husbands love your wife as Christ loved the church. It kind of ties it all in and it wraps it all together because both of us, our role within a marriage, both the husband and the wife, their role ultimately is to be imitators of God, right? And they're specifically, women submit to your husband, husbands submit to the Lord for the good of your bride, right? But in all of it, what we're trying to do is simply be imitators of God. And we talked about this little story about this boy that I saw mowing a lawn, and he came in and his dad was mowing a lawn, and this little 4-year-old boy came out and brought a toy mower and walked alongside his dad in the part of the lawn that had already been mowed. And as they would go up and down, the dad would periodically stop and pick up a rock or a stick that was in the way that was going to obviously damage the mower if he ran over it, and he'd throw it off to the side. And the little boy he's pushing a fake plastic mower, right? He would see his father doing whatever he's doing, and he would walk around front and pretend to pick up something because there wasn't anything there anymore. His dad's already taken care of it. And he'd throw it out, and then he'd go back and stand there by his little plastic mower and walk alongside his dad again as they would mow. And they would go, this process kept going. And then eventually his mom came out and gave the dad a glass of tea and the little boy a sippy cup, and they drank together, and he mimicked everything his dad did. And the idea was that he was simply imitating his dad. And if you were to ask that little kid, hey, why did you pretend to pick up a rock? Or why did your dad pick up a rock? He would have no idea why his dad picked up a rock because he doesn't understand how it all works. All he knows is that he wants to be like his dad. And this is something his dad is doing. And the same as, well, why did you drink your tea the way your dad did? I just want to be like my dad. And you ask him, how does a mower work? I don't care how a mower works. My dad was out there mowing, so I'm going to go out there with him and do everything he does. And the idea is that, and that kid went in and said, hey, Mom, me and Dad mowed the lawn, right? When the kid didn't mow the lawn, he just imitated his dad and followed alongside him in everything he did. And the idea is that that's how we're called to imitate God as dearly loved children who just look up and want to be like their dad. And sometimes we understand what he's doing. Sometimes we understand why God calls us to do this or to do that. Sometimes he says, pick up that stick, and you have no idea why, but who cares? I want to be like my dad, and this is what he does. And so in the moments where we don't understand why God's doing what he's doing, or why he's calling us to do something, we can, hopefully what pushes us over that is just the fact that we, regardless of anything else, we just want to be like him. And that drives us to that. And that's how we need to bring that kind of humility and that kind of passion to all relationships, not just our marriages, although that's the context of this. And I think it wraps all of it up together pretty well. So
Beautiful. That's a beautiful picture, a beautiful story. Well, that I think that kind of sums up what we talked about last week. It was a great message, a great encouragement. Also great to know that our marriages not only can be glorifying unto the Lord, but a picture of his relationship with us, of the bride and the groom. So thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you this Sunday, Palm Sunday. So be excited, be in worship, be in prayer. We'll see you next week.
'Cause we bear the light of the Son of Man, so there's nothing left to fear. So I'll walk with you in the shadowlands till the shadows disappear.